Production underwriting for Ruckus has been made possible in part by the generous contributions from Fred and Lou Hartwig and from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. The Ruckette panel tonight features lobbyist Woody Cozad, media consultant Mary O'Halloran, Kansas City Star editorial writer and columnist Yela Bahaka, and Urban League CEO Gwen Grant. I'm Mike Shannon. Well, apparently not everyone is on board with the downtown streetcar starter system. Two property owners are filing suit claiming the election creating the district and hiking their taxes is a classic case of taxation without representation. The tax increases in the special streetcar district are designed to help fund the $100 million 2-mile project. As regular viewers of Ruckus will recall, Woody predicted this a few weeks ago. So, Woody, any predictions about what the outcome of the case is going to be?
No, I don't. There are constitutional claims here of the type you just spoke about. I believe the best claim against this district is that they stacked two transportation development districts on top of each other and that violates state law.
That's one district for the starter line and the power and light district already in existence.
So that you've stacked two, 1 cent sales taxes on top of each other. And the state law says that creates the right to have TDDs that the limit is 1 cent. Now, it doesn't say you can't stack two of them, but the implication would seem to be if the legislature wanted a 1 cent sales tax limit that that would just be gutted if you could put 1, 2, 3, or 4 on top of each other. Now, their response might be you have a separate election for each one. But in that case, it would have been easier to have a separate election just on the tax. Every time you create a TDD, you've got to go through the whole thing of creating it, then have the election for the tax. Why would you do that? If you wanted people to be able to vote to just keep raising the tax, you just have a tax. Okay, we got a 1 cent tax. We want to raise that to 2. We'll have an election about raising the tax in this district that we've already created to 2. It doesn't make a lot of sense to stack them. And so there's an argument, and I think it's the best argument against this district that is the stacking argument. There's going to be, I think, a challenge to the standing of these plaintiffs to bring that case, that particular claim. On the other hand, if they were to get it thrown out of court just on standing, that's almost an invitation to somebody to bring the suit who is in the district.
They're property owners, but not owners?
Well,
property owners, but not voters, not residents.
They're not operating a business in the Power and Light District where the stacking has occurred. So they might not have standing to bring the stacking claim. Somebody who was in the district, both districts, could bring that claim.
Well, I mean, hey, Woody, anything can happen in court. I mean, yes, I'm a supporter of the streetcar line. You did warn that a suit was coming, and, you know, God bless him for bringing it. On the stacking question, yeah, there are limits to all kinds of sales taxes. I mean, the city cannot go past a certain point. The county can't go past a certain point with its taxes. In this case, what it says is you can't go past 1 cent on a TDD. All right, well, they didn't. They had one here, and they built a bigger one for the streetcar, which is another one. Yes, in a certain area, and actually maybe another area, but a certain area of Power and Light, they're stacked. So yeah, we'll see legally. There's another one of the pro streetcar people already found that Belton has the same situation where there are two TDDs stacked on top of each other, at least partly. As far as the other part, which is, hey, I'm a property owner, I didn't get to vote in this tax. Again, anything could happen in a lawsuit, but like, you know, there are numerous examples of that where somebody does not live in Kansas City, owns property, and on April 2nd, will be voting on whether their taxes are going to stay the same on this property tax for health care.
As your colleague Dave Helling pointed out, there are lots of taxes people pay who did not vote to approve those taxes.
So just one last point is that I think, again, a lawsuit has been filed. It's because some people don't like the streetcar. And neither one of the legal things brought up in that particular lawsuit, to me, seem to have much standing.
Just before we go to Mary, will this delay the city's efforts to begin the streetcar system?
Well, no, not unless a judge says you cannot start collecting that tax on April 1, which is when the sales tax is going to go. The property tax is actually not collected until December. So I mean,
but the planning and whatever else is involved will
they're going to continue. They have the money coming in. They already have money from the city to go ahead and do some of that stuff.
Well, actually, it's a pretty good thing, I think, sometimes when there's a really innovative project that hasn't been put through the ringer, to have a lawsuit or two, to get it cleared, to get any questions out of the way so that it doesn't come at the end of the process, comes at the beginning. Also, I think apparently isn't true, Woody, that when they go in for a TDD designation, a judge has to sign off that it's legal. Don't they have they have a hearing?
Yeah, they went through all that.
And they look through the whole thing and they say, is this legal? Does this fit with the state's intention in the law? So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you know, kudos to Dave Helling, just put down the taxation without representation charge. My gosh, the country would fall apart if we ever took that literally. It's just not possible.
Does it matter to the Jackson County commuter line system that's being contemplated if this district, the starter streetcar district downtown, is halted?
No, because his sales tax is, well, I mean, Mike Sanders' sales tax from Jackson County is totally interdependent of this. But he had said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and pick up the cost, so you won't have an extra sales tax. So it would have wiped out.
But from a connection standpoint, going here, going there, using the downtown.
Well, you're going to want the streetcar to be built, yeah, for the commuter rail.
So there is a relationship. One is not dependent on the other.
I don't think it's. I think his plan would stand if there weren't streetcar, quite frankly, because you're going to still have a bus system and all that stuff. But if you're selling Kansas City as we're entering the 19th century as far as transportation goes, you might want to have streetcars.
And from your article the other day about metro growth patterns, it looks like Jackson County is going to continue to grow.
From the east,
and there may be some transportation needs in the future. All right. Kansas City Star political writer Steve Kraske raises an interesting question about one of the stars in the Kansas Republican Party, Secretary of State Chris Kobach. Will Kobach actually seek re-election, as he recently told a reporter, and forego a shot at higher office? If that's his plan, then rumors of his possible challenge to incumbent Republicans, Senator Pat Roberts or Governor Sam Brownback, can be put to rest. If he does run for re-election, he's likely to run into opposition from a well-heeled Mission Hills Democrat. Is that redundant? Randy Ralston says he will put in whatever it takes financially, adding Kobach is out of control over issues such as vote fraud and voter ID. So, Yale, do you think, not hope, do you think that this rising star, Chris Kobach, is in danger of falling?
As we sit here today, I don't think so. And I say that because Kansans are in their conservative mode right now. They've elected Brownback, and I mean, Republicans basically hold sway on state house level. So why would you think at this point he is in trouble? I don't think he's in trouble politically. I think his issue orientation, it will be troublesome, which is I'm anti-immigrant. You know, I'm anti-illegal immigrant, I'm anti-brown people. However it's going to be spun by the other side, it will be an issue that, hey, the guy spends time outside of the state. Hey, the guy does all this stuff. And as he's admitted, I guess, yeah, he does that, but he does it on his own time. You know, I mean, that's his claim, and he's going to stick to it. So, you know, frankly, sure, I guess from a political standpoint, I'd like him to be in trouble because I don't believe he's been a great Secretary of State. However, if you said, does he have election chances are very good right now? I'd say yes, they are.
Yeah, I got the impression, though, Mary, that the Kraske article seemed to suggest that it wasn't a slam dunk for Kobach if he ran for re-election, that this Mission Hills Democrat would be a significant challenger.
The not very well known Mission Hills Democrat. Well, no, the Mission Hills Democrat is a very nice fellow. I've been to his home for a fundraiser. It would be his first run for office, and God knows it's time for the Democratic Party to start putting forward candidates. But
Kansas?
you know, Chris Kobach in the state of Kansas is controversial even with Republicans. I mean, he is so far to the right. He is the leader of a national movement to restrict Hispanic people and immigrant people in this country in the most severe way. And his campaign against voter fraud, Yale, when there isn't any, is just
Mary,
outrageous.
but as he points out, the voter ID law went into effect last year. There was a primary and a general election, and I don't know of any claims that people weren't allowed to vote.
You wouldn't, Mike. The idea behind voter suppression is that people don't go who think they might have some sort of difficulty. There are 200-some thousand people in the state who don't have proper ID. Wait till people have to bring their birth certificates and thank
I want to get Woody in here and then
Sure.
go to Gwen. From a tactical standpoint, looking at his political career, is the best move now for Kobach, do you think, to run for re-election as Secretary of State, wait a few years and then go for something higher?
Sure. And look, I don't know the fellow who's talking about running against him. I presume he's talking about self-funding. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But the overall history is not great for self-funded candidates. Once in a while, one of them comes through. But Kobach should run for re-election. I think all these controversial issues that everybody gets excited about are more likely to give him trouble when he runs for something like governor or the U.S. Senate than they are running for re-election as Secretary of State. You can try and gin it up and make people mad, but he's been Secretary of State for 4 years. The sky hasn't fallen in. But when he starts to run for something bigger, that's when, if I were the Democrats, I'd be looking. And
I'm not sure, Mary, that he's controversial with a lot of Republicans in Kansas.
Well, he should be.
I mean, the Republicans that Mary knows.
The Republicans should be concerned about the Chris Kobaches of the world. I mean, their party is in decline because of this far right, the philosophical issues that the far right pushes, and putting all that time in on voter fraud, as Mary said, when there really is there's no material cause for it, and being xenophobic in all of his behavior is just not in the best interest.
Now, what evidence is there that he's xenophobic in all of his behavior?
He's just so anti-immigrant,
he's anti-illegal immigrant.
Well,
I mean,
he's
there is a difference.
Anti-immigration, I think, if you really pay attention.
And
you know what?
And
the other thing that needs to be concerned about illegal immigration, the thing that needs to be clear about that as well, too, is that many of these people, the perception is that we need to secure the borders, implying that all these people are coming in over these fences, and that's not the case. Many of them enter the country legally, and then the legality of their entry lapses.
President Obama says we have to secure the border.
Well, of course we need to secure the border, but securing the border is not the primary issue.
12 million people, legal entry lapse.
All right. The Missouri legislature is back in session, and the future of the Kansas City, Missouri School District is back in question. Legislation is being considered that, if implemented, would empower the state to take control of the district more quickly, perhaps by the beginning of the next school year, maybe sooner. Clearly, this is an issue that divides patrons and others who are well aware of the long tradition of turmoil in the district. Gwen, I know you focus a lot on education issues. Is this new possibility of a state takeover good news or bad news?
I think it's great news, especially, you know, the taxpayers, people who pay taxes to support public education, the parents and children, the consumers of public education in the Kansas City, Missouri School District deserve better. When you have low student achievement, high dropout rates, persistent year after year after year, with a district that continues to claim that they're making progress when we just can't see any material evidence of progress, that I think that the state should have the ability to intervene. And I like the way this bill is structured. It gives the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education the opportunity to immediately intervene in this situation rather than wait another year.
So, let's clarify. The Senate, the state Senate has passed legislation. It's going to the House. If the House passes and the governor signs, then it can happen immediately.
They could intervene immediately, or they could choose not to. I mean, they can assess the situation and choose what path they intend to take.
Now, question to you. Let's say it is passed by the legislature and it goes to the governor. What's the best decision politically for Jay Nixon at that point? Sign it, not sign it?
I think sign it. because there's been a lot of community engagement and deliberation on this issue throughout the community. And I believe that from what I could ascertain, the majority of the electorate thinks it's time to do something different. Everything else has not worked. He's not going to get a lot of political backlash because most of the political organizations, the Legislative Black Caucus, are in support of this move.
Yeah, and I think one of the points, 2 points. One, the Kansas City, Missouri public schools does not have a lot of friends in Jeff City. So it's not like anybody's going to go, oh, well, wait, this is too quick. It's years and years and years of frustration of dealing there. And the second thing is, as you just kind of mentioned, I mean, I think people in Kansas City are so frustrated with the situation that giving the state the option of acting more quickly, it's never probably made a lot of sense that, well, we got a problem. We're going to wait 2 years before we can actually take an action. And that's with your most troubled student / district. So even though I think there are some problems with doing it immediately, because you could have somebody almost overreact, that could be a problem in the future. We haven't had that problem because we waited so long. So give the state the opportunity. I don't think state control and all that stuff is a panacea, don't get me wrong, but at least let them help earlier.
Well, we tried everything else and failed. We might as well try this.
Here's what State Senator David Pierce, I believe, Warrensburg, Republican, chair of the Education Committee.
Of the Senate, yeah.
Here's what he said. He sponsored the bill. He says the bottom line is the district is unaccredited. Why wait? That makes sense?
Yeah, and as you can see from the vote in the Senate, the bill itself is not the bill's problem. The problem it had last year, and that it could face again this year, is that Senator Pierce, except for the Kansas City School District, is an opponent of any change in education whatsoever. And so the people who want change in education overall aren't happy with Senator Pierce. So they're going to have bills they want passed. They will die in Senator Pierce's committee. So it is entirely possible that Senator Pierce's bill could get to the House, go to the Education Committee, get put in a file drawer somewhere until he acts on the reform bills. And that's what happened last year. And then what happened was the Kansas City bill didn't pass, and the other reform bills didn't pass.
Yeah, but some of that, Woody, was the reform, what you're calling reform, which sounds reasonable on the air, does not really delineate
we got to get out of this, Mary.
Yeah,
Mary, real quickly.
One question. Why don't we ever see a plan from the state, what they would do when and if they get the chance to take over? I have a big question about that. Where's the plan?
Well, the bill, Mary, the bill gives them, in fact, a whole series of different things they can do. So you don't know.
Mary, that was a nice lead-in for the next topic.
The plan.
Do you trust the federal government, the folks in Washington, to do the right thing, yes, or state, but this is about the federal government. According to a Pew Research Center poll, the answer for most Americans, 73%, is no. And not only that, the poll shows 53% believe the national government threatens their personal rights. Andy Kohut, director of the Pew Center, told the PBS NewsHour, seen here on KCPT, that conditions are reaching the boiling point.
I think that people are at the boiling point when it comes to we're not getting what we want out of Washington. Quote unquote, something's got to give somewhere along the line. Public patience is not endless.
All right, Mary, you're a former federal official. How do you explain these attitudes of the public toward the federal government?
Oh, ask Mike. I actually did a very good job, Woody. You would have been proud. For good reason. Everyone ought to be a little afraid of the federal government. Everybody ought to mistrust the government a bit. Question here is this mistrust? I mean, what's the basis of trust? Trust is a sense that you believe in the honesty and integrity and reliability of a person or an institution. And certainly, I mean, the current Congress has ratings that are lower than, when somebody put it, a head lice and colonoscopies in terms of what people, fear. I mean, it is just outrageous, the current situation with the Congress. But whether people distrust the government as a whole, you'd rather ask, well, do I distrust the Marine Corps, the Weather Service?
Well, what was interesting is that apparently, according to this study, people don't trust the government but they blame the members of Congress primarily. They don't blame the system that we have in place.
What was the figure he gave in there that
25% of people have a favorable view of Congress, and 90% got reelected.
Re-elect the congressman they had before, even when they're given an opportunity. So I think what you see right now on that poll is a distrust of the government because of gridlock, this sense that the government cannot act, that it can't address the problems of our time. You see the numbers rise with Democrats when a Republican president is in, and they fear government intrusion in terms of secrecy and various kinds of exercises of
use of drones.
Drones would be one of them. The second one,
weapons of mass destruction.
When Republicans or Democrats are in power, Republicans are upset.
Now, there are 53% fear that the government's going to take away their rights, the federal government. Now look at this picture, Mary. Is that the reason the American people are afraid of the federal government?
Oh, I don't
feel
think
threatened?
So. The American people reelected this man overwhelmingly, and it wasn't even close. And his poll numbers are rising as the days go on. The more we talk about fiscal cliffs, and the Congress continues to hold its pet projects and its pet ideologies hostage towards solving the country's, as opposed to solving our problems, the more his popularity will go up.
People are safe, skeet or not. He was skeet shooting, Mary.
He looks like he's really. I shot a few skeets in my
positive angle. You know, when the fiscal cliff stuff didn't happen. In other words, Congress said, "Oh, well, we'll just go ahead and get." Oh, that's kind of interesting. And then just a few days ago, when the debt ceiling thing was, quote, solved for a few weeks without a big thing coming up. Now the sequestration thing is coming up. I mean, actually, if Congress did address these head on, and I understand both those were put off, but at least they didn't become this huge, huge thing that put the country over the cliff. There were a couple grown-ups in the room who made this happen on both sides of the political aisle. Now, the next step is actually have a real solution. I mean, a grand bargain or whatever you want to call it, which is, you know, the trillions in cuts and yes, a little bit more in tax increases, where you can see 8 or 10 years from now, we're in a better spot. Then, I mean, I think Congress's approval ratings would go up if they actually did their job and did not run huge deficits and actually did some cutting that needs to be done on Medicare and Social Security as far as setting different limits.
Got to go in 10 seconds. Do you agree with Gail? It's got to be more compromise between the two parties?
Well, yeah. But let me tell you, this is a deep problem in America. Yeah. It falls into two categories. One is the government is terribly efficient and is going to take away my rights, and the other is the government is bungling incompetent. Right. And you have to, well, truly, and you have to break this distrust down into those two groups and see who falls into each.
All right, we've got to move on. It is time now for Roast and Toast, where each Rockette takes a minute, hopefully half a minute, to cheer or sneer at people and events in the news. And first tonight is Mary.
Well, in the spirit of Barack Obama's historic inaugural address, Steve Rose this week wrote a column in the Kansas City Star entitled, "People Will Judge Those Who Stand Against Social Equality." He spoke clearly for an inclusive community, and that is gay men and boys in scouting, legal protections for racial minorities, and most significant of all from my perspective, maybe not more significant, but terribly significant, he spoke out for the unrestricted right of women to be heard and to be listened to and to speak out in our political system. No comments about we should be excluded because we will go all giddy and get emotional. Steve gets my toast for today. He gets it.
Well, this is a toast as well to my hosts on Monday at the Overland Park Rotary. We had a lot of good questions, and some of them were about the newspaper and how we're going to survive. Others were about, you know, Johnson County and Kansas City and some of the competitions going on there, as well as what might happen in the future. My point to them, and they were already there. I mean, there were a lot of high muckety-mucks in the room. They were already there. There has to be some kind of regional look at getting jobs, at improving education, entrepreneurship, all these good things we talk about. It has to be regional. Yes, Johnson County is a good leader, but it also has to happen regional-wide for us to succeed.
A toast to two institutions affiliated with the Episcopal Church. The first is St. Luke's Hospital. where they told my father when he checked in that he would probably die there. That was in 1950. Last Friday, they turned out finally to be right. He passed away at St. Luke's. The staff could not have been more professional, more kind, or considerate. The other institutions, Bishop Spencer Place, where my father spent the last 16 years of his life, and their staff there, the same way, professional, considerate, and kind as they could be. These are two wonderful assets in our community.
I agree 100%, Woody. And with you, Mary, here, you know, I'll go giddy when we get equal rights for everybody in America. Now, here's my toast to David Pierce, Chairman of the Education Committee, for his leadership in introducing Senate Bill 7, which was unanimously perfected by the Senate on Tuesday evening. It is my hope that this bill will move quickly through the House of Representatives so that we can, in the words of President Lincoln, have a day of reckoning for the families in the Kansas City public school system.
And I believe the Go Giddy reference is one to Yale and something he said last week on the program. I want to toast K-State football coach Bill Snyder. Bill and I go back a long way, although he may not remember or care. I was a few years behind him at Washington Elementary and Lafayette High in St. Joseph, Missouri. Bill was an outstanding all-around athlete in school and has, of course, become one of the nation's premier coaches. And in our youth-obsessed culture, what person over 50 doesn't take delight in seeing Snyder sign a new 5-year, multi-million-dollar contract? Bill Snyder is now 73. And that's Ruckus for this week. Nick Haynes with Kansas City Week in Review coming up Friday evening at 7:30. Local show is up next. Now on behalf of the Ruckettes and the Ruckus crew, I'm Mike Shannon. Thanks for watching and good night.